but all of the firms want to move towards integrated business models that are based around subscriptions.
Yeah.
So you subscribe for a year, for 2 years, subscribe for 3 years, you get a bigger discount.
Yeah.
And that will include a range of services.
Yeah.
So what the analyst firms typically are moving towards is a business model where you get syndicated research, some or all of the research.
Yeah.
Some firms will slice up their research so that you can only get this part or that part of the full research portfolio.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our #1 priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's show. If you're joining for the first time, in this particular segment, we invite a special guest, and this is going to be interview. So we generally meet for this every Friday between 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern. So we have several guests lined up for today. We have a very special guest, Duncan, and I'll let him introduce himself. Duncan, do you want to introduce?
I will be delighted to, and thank you so much for inviting me here. It's always lovely to be in your conversations. You really are able to join people together in such a wonderful way. I'm Duncan Chapple. I'm research director at Sage Circle, which is a 25-year-old analyst relations consultancy. I was an industry analyst in the 1990s, around the time of the dot-com boom, but in the years since then, I've been running industry analyst relations programs, helping technology vendors to build better connections, more productive relationships with industry analyst firms.
Okay, amazing. So once again, thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to talk to my audience just for a second, and then we'll come back, to some of the questions for you. Okay.
Thank you.
If you're in the audience, make sure you guys post your questions, comments. Generally, we are a big fan of three-way conversation here. Even if you are not part of the conversation, we sort of feel that you are kind of part of the conversation. So we are looking forward to your questions, comments, any sort of stories that you might have from your perspective. So, Duncan, coming back to our topic, I guess this whole world, the research analyst world, is a little bit of mystery for everybody, I guess, even for people who are kind of practicing inside that. I think there's education gap in terms of what value they bring to the table, how to utilize them, So let's talk, maybe give us the lay of the land in terms of how research firms work. What is their business model? Obviously the buyers are going to be the primary consumers, I guess, but vendors are also sort of paying here, right? So we have two different perspectives for the research firms, and we have many different needs that they generally serve. So let's start with the overall lay of the land in terms of how you think research industry is laid out, and then we can peel layers in terms of the other things.
Absolutely. Well, a great place to start any discussion of the analyst industry is with Gartner. It's one of the oldest analyst firms. It's definitely the largest, and it's a fantastic example of the way that analyst firms grow and the way that they diversify. So that's a business that started off helping people to buy IBM servers. They had very deep expertise. They were very careful in being able to get information about the pricing that different organizations had for different configurations with IBM servers, and then over time extended their work to more and more technologies, and to be able to look at firms in different ways, not only looking at their pricing, but looking at all of the capabilities that these solutions need to be effective for vendors. To be effective for vendors' clients, and then also looking at the shape of the market as a whole. And that means that analysts are extremely useful for anybody who is managing technology, anybody who's trying to get the best out of the investments that they have at the moment. They're extremely powerful for people who are trying to buy technology, and of course they're very useful for anybody who's trying to sell or regulate technology. So people who are more, on the supply side than on the demand side of the equilibrium. And now we have, a huge growth in the number of analyst firms. There are maybe 10,000 analysts, maybe 1,000 analyst firms.
Yeah.
Gartner remains the largest,
Yeah.
but it's an extremely vibrant market sector to be in.
Okay, so very interesting. And obviously Gartner is definitely a big name in the analyst space. And then there are millions of other firms. And sometimes there is sort of misconception. Any time any companies want to go for any of the analyst firms, obviously Gartner is going to be one of the names that they are going to choose. But there is a reason why these millions of other firms exist, right? In my mind, when I look at the analyst firms, and you mentioned one point related to being really cheap, and obviously depth is very subjective, right? A person, let's take an example. I don't know, what educational background you have. Anybody who's going to have any sort of educational background, they are going to come from something, right? Either they are going to be mechanical engineer, electronics, or some sort of computer. Maybe they are going to have MBA. So the subject matter expertise matters, right? Because you are going to have expertise in one particular domain. And when you talk about depth, like the real depth, it's not just marketing depth, I guess. Depth matters, right? Even for the analyst work, you need to understand these things deeply to be able to forecast, to be able to, provide enough intelligence, I guess, that buyers are going to find useful.
Yeah.
So do you think that one analyst firm can master all of these domains? Is it possible? How? And then when you talk about depth, I guess, how deep are we talking about here?
I think that how much depth people need really depends on the client.
Yeah.
A lot of buyers have got uniquely deep experience of their own domain.
Yeah.
And so no analyst is going to know your organization as well as you do.
Yeah.
So I think very often buyers contact analysts for various reasons. I can think of my own experience. I was an analyst at the company that's now Omdia, part of the Informa group.
Yeah.
I was working on a project with a big retail bank in North America.
Yeah.
That was buying credit card businesses, folding them in.
Yeah.
And as they added these extra servers into their IT world, things were not scaling in any way. They had some really deep problems. So my background is in very large data sets, how to make very large data sets behave better, and how to get more insights out of very large data sets. Now, I didn't know more about their industry, I hope, than they did. But I was really familiar with some of the more generic problems. I knew the questions to ask. And I understood, because I spoke to other people in the industry, that the pain that they were having was not unique to themselves. And so I was able to help them to navigate a way forward and to better understand that actually they needed to move to quite a different technology platform from the one that had been working fine for them in the past.
Yeah.
And then they just hit a point, they just hit a break point. Well, I think a lot of what analysts bring is that perspective and the knowledge of what other buyers are doing. It's not necessarily very deep technical depth, but it is more a familiarity with kind of hanging around the neighborhood and understanding what is going on for users, and then being able to speak to buyers, because buyers obviously are super focused on the pain points that users are having. You might have technology that's working fine, but people are complaining about it, so you want to fix it. So that opportunity to be able to speak to people who are using technology, to speak to people who are in the procurement, and to speak to people who are in the manufacturing and the selling of it, that gives analysts a very different perspective. And I would say really it's that perspective that makes analysts different rather than technical depth. A lot of customers have got more technical depth.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And, when you talk about things such as servers, I guess, that is the example that you gave, right? And servers, for the most part, I mean, if you look at the offering, even though some people might argue that, that is relatively complex as well, it could get really deep. You need to understand so many different things from the pricing, from the configuration perspective. But if you look at this more from the organizational procurement or maybe life cycle. I don't know if that is the right term that I should be using. But if you look at the overall cycle, how these things are consumed, how they are used, how they are adopted, I mean, it's a box. It's really a box. A server is a box. Okay, you are not going to cause as much disruption just because you are replacing a box.
Well, obviously things matter, right? I mean, absolutely. You could just as easily say it's just food, right? You could just as easily say it's just a car. You could just as easily say it's just a house.
Yeah.
But of course, there's a huge difference in technologies. Yeah, there is a difference in their performance. There's an even bigger difference in their price performance.
Yeah.
There's a difference in their resilience.
Yeah.
You look at, I've been working on some research looking at buyers of cloud services.
Yeah.
Actually, you do have buyers who will say, well, I will put this application on that cloud, and I'll put this application on that cloud. So very often we like to think that these products are the same, but actually when you are putting them under pressure, when you need them to perform at scale, there really is a difference, and an even bigger difference in price performance.
So not trying to underestimate that you don't require the information, the intelligence, the research for the infrastructure products as well. But the point that I was trying to get to is you don't really have as much disruption when you talk about these products such as your infrastructure or slightly more commoditized products. But when you talk about other strategic products, and again, the point I'm trying to make is the generalization that people make with the product offerings. So we have like million categories in the market, and each are very different. Their buying cycle is very different. The kind of disruptions that they are going to cause is going to be very different. For example, let's say now let's go to your app space. In app space, you have very different problems. It's very, very, very hard for anybody, and we do these quadrants as well. We are publishing these research as well, but we are the first ones to admit that don't look at the quadrant and make decisions, to be completely honest. That's how we like to talk about, because it could really fire back. And our job is not necessarily to misguide the buyers. Our job as the analyst firms is to make sure that they are making the right decisions so that they can be successful, and hopefully, because of that, the vendors can be successful as well, because we are sort of playing the matchmaker here, right? So when you talk about these strategic products, and they are two completely different products. When you talk about B2C versus B2B, when you talk about commoditized products versus slightly more strategic products that are going to have real impact on your business processes, business model, etc., you require a lot more heavy lifting and depth. That is generally not going to be possible, I guess, if you talk about simply research. I mean, that's my take. What do you think?
I mean, of course, it's true that analysts have much more impact on emergent technologies where markets are not stable. Buyers need more guidance. Sellers are obviously still trying to establish product market fit at that stage. Pricing models and return on investment are extremely unclear. So definitely analysts are highly influential at that stage.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if you think of these mature technologies, they are huge. And a mature organization that is replacing a mission critical system is still going to use an industry analyst. And those deals can be massive, and analysts, and especially so many of the analyst firms, are moving into more advisory work, more work supporting RFIs, RFPs, purchasing processes. I'd say the analyst influence it's bound to be bigger on relatively mature technologies, where actually the buyer might want extra help exactly because the market might look as if the functionality is relatively commodified. And it can be very hard when you're buying something, any kind of product, to tell the difference between different things, because they look so similar, and because of the way the different providers change their language to make it look as if they all provide the same as their more fully featured competitors. But an analyst will know the truth, or at least an analyst will be closer to the truth. They will have had more conversations with buyers, more conversations with your competitors. I've had the experience at user conferences, seeing users talking very openly about their pain. But if you're wanting to buy from a tech company, you have not been to the user conference of its suppliers. You've not spoken to its competitors. So analysts have a lot of impact. You're right. Those early stage markets, analysts can make or break them as markets. Yeah. They can say that the markets won't come to maturity. They can give negative feedback to investors. So absolutely, analysts have a make or break impact on the fortune of vendors and of technologies in that early stage. And that's why every conversation around hype, and the role that analysts play in technology hype is so important. But the other side is probably vendors have got more impact on relatively mature product technologies because it's still hard to buy those, and buyers still need support in producing the business case for new investments, especially in this crazy economy.
Yeah, no, I mean the economy is always tricky, right? And in this time, it's going to be trickier, I guess, for everybody, for buyers as well as for the analyst firms.
Yeah.
So you are definitely spot on. So let's touch a little bit more on the business model of the research firms. And you have sort of been on the both sides, right? So you bring a very interesting perspective. So go ahead.
So I suppose there's really three things that analyst firms sell, and as they mature, that business model kind of changes. Very often you're selling single reports initially, or you're running specific consulting engagements, specific advisory engagements. But all of the firms want to move towards integrated business models that are based around subscriptions. So you subscribe for a year. For 2 years, subscribe for 3 years, you get a bigger discount. And that will include a range of services. So what the analyst firms typically are moving towards is a business model where you get syndicated research, some or all of the research. Some firms will slice up their research so that you can only get this part or that part of the full research portfolio. They'll have events. They'll have advisory services. They'll often have peer communities. And then now we're seeing them also moving quite effectively over the last 10 years into providing peer reviews. So collecting what buyers are saying about the solutions that they're actually using. And for example, in the case of Gartner is getting more eyeballs now on these reviews that it's collecting than on things like the Magic Quadrant, for which it has been so famous for decades.
So let's talk about these subscriptions a little bit more, right? So for example, let's say if you talk about the enterprise buyers, and you are right, we have seen this as well, that, okay, if I talk to my enterprise CIO, they are probably going to budget that, I need this subscription from Gartner because I am using this for procurement all the time, I guess. I don't know how much they are going to use, but obviously they need to justify the ROI from their side as well. If you're a very massive IT organization, you are always procuring something, then you can justify the cost of $30,000, $40,000, whatever you are paying. But let's say if you look at the SMB market, and I don't know how active they are, to be completely honest. And again, the industry matters as well. For example, let's say if you talk about the industrial spaces, they don't have as much IT procurement, and depending upon which IT you are talking about. Are you talking about the real informational business side technology or the operational technology? These two are two completely different things, right? And they go through very different organizations, even inside these companies as well, right? So overall, I guess, when you look at the SMB, have you seen that they are willing to spend this kind of money in the SMB space as well, when they might not be doing, I guess, as much procurement, from the IT perspective? So is it more of the enterprise thing in your experience, or is it also SMB that they, okay, no, I mean, I definitely need this $50,000, Gartner, no questions asked. Okay, you have the check, go. So what's been your experience?
I'd say there are two sides of analyst impact on the SMB market. One is that analyst firms definitely have become much more intrigued in following how early stage firms can use technology. Earlier on, you were talking about the technology procurement cycle, and I think it's very important to have that understanding of technology being a cycle, because while vendors would quite like to sell some software and then kind of run away from it, actually, if you're, for example, in the manufacturing space, you've made a commitment towards a particular manufacturing execution system, but then you still have all of the attendant problems of ensuring that you've got transparency over your supply chain, over your environmental reporting. The needs continue to evolve, even if the core technology is not subject to a procurement review.
Yeah.
So these ongoing services can add a lot of value to people who are trying to get the most out of their existing investment without spending more. And I think analyst firms are getting better at providing support for that. But also, we're seeing a lot more kind of research that is free to use.
Yeah.
So the business model still depends on vendors and end user organizations paying. What we're seeing is a lot more research being made freely available to users, and that allows the insight of analysts to penetrate more extensively into the SMB sector. Of course, they've always been present because analysts are speaking at events. They've got incredibly high profiles in the media, especially in the tech media. But over the last few years, over the last decades, we've seen an accelerating trend towards what you might call freemium analyst firms, where they're giving some of their research away.
Yeah.
And we're also seeing a lot more vendor-sponsored research, where vendors might be licensing a piece of analyst content and making it freely available, but they're putting it behind a download form so that they are harvesting the details of somebody who's interested in buying something in the market where they're trying to sell.
Yeah, very interesting. So we have some comments, so let's go over those first, and then we can come back to our conversation as well. So we have Sashi. Sashi is saying, analysts have to think about end user impact and be very familiar with experience. And I guess there is a divide in the market. And I think this is the conversation that we were having, Duncan, as well. And this is the story that I want to talk about that I could not touch during my conversation. So I don't know, Duncan, if you are familiar with a company called Spend Matters. Spend Matters, know them. Okay, interesting. Yeah, so they are very well known in the procurement space, procurement tech space. They are one of the hottest. And sometimes when you look at the procurement space, they might recognize Spend Matters more than Gartner because they bring very specific specialization that none of the other firms are going to have. Definitely. So I'll give you the taste of their life cycle in terms of how they have evolved and what their priorities are. And I don't know if this is going to be consistent with the other research and analyst firms as well. So in their case, initially when they started, they are a boutique firm, and generally 90% of the boutique firms are going to be very high touch, meaning they are going to provide very tailored experience. Yes. You are a buyer, I'll give you anything and everything. I'll work for free. I'll work over weekend. I'll help you. That's how most boutique firms are. And then you have a very interesting entity called private equity. Okay. When they get involved, they are very good at making money. We all know this.
That's their job.
Okay. And one of the mandate that they had, so it's almost like change in government, right? One of the mandate that they had is no advisory whatsoever. Okay. The only thing they were going to sell is the data, the research. Obviously, they are going to have that business model as well. But at the end of the day, if you look at the software firms, they are all going to argue that, hey, we do consulting as well. We do professional services as well. But the mandate that you have from the investors, if I'm investing my personal money, you are investing your personal money, you are looking at the prediction and revenue. Let's be honest here. Okay. And the prediction and revenue is only going to come from where? When you have the repeatable retainer-based revenue.
In practice, this really varies a little bit from firm to firm. Yeah. So if you think of a kind of an affirming example of that, Gartner is an affirming example of that.
Yeah.
That's an organization which is doing much less consultancy work than it used to do. Its advisory work is much more structured into, if you've got a big question, book more half-hour calls.
Yeah.
And it's much harder than it used to be to get an analyst to come and visit you, to come and spend a day with you if you're a Gartner client that needs to work things through more deeply. And of course, that does mean that they can scale. And goodness me, Gartner, if you think about it, Gartner has probably got more or less the same number of analysts as it had when its revenue was 1/10 of the revenue that it has today. So there's a lot more other people wrapped around that, a lot more salespeople wrapped around it. But what Gartner has shown is the incredible scalability of that kind of model, where you have got where the primary value is one-to-many consumption of syndicated research and events, and where the one-to-one advisory element is reduced. But on the other hand, for example, I was just at Mobile World Congress, where you've got a lot of firms that are you've got a lot of telecom niche firms, organizations like Analysis Mason, CCS Insights, and others. A lot of these organizations are actually finding that there's a bigger revenue opportunity for them on the consulting side than on syndicated research. You have to do the syndicated research to do the consultancy. And goodness me, if you can do that consultancy, then your syndicated research becomes much better. So there can be immense scalability if you're a generalist analyst firm that is selling, for example, into the enterprise tech market, which is more or less limitless. On the other hand, imagine a firm that's focused on selling to telecoms operators. How many telecoms operators can there be in the world? If you sell to the 150 biggest operators, you've probably sold to most of the market. So there can be some dynamics where actually the ability of that business to scale is limited, and you have to cross-sell with more events, more advisory services, more consultancy, more peer networking, if you're going to make the most out of that business.
Yeah, and I think based on this question, everybody's sort of trying to argue that, we should be doing a lot more end user work, which is great, but that falls into the real consulting world. And the challenge that you run into that business model is that, okay, I mean, I get it that, Gartner is going to spend an hour a day, I get it. But you know what? For enterprise tech projects, to be completely honest, when you look at the real business requirements, the change management, a day is nothing. Like, how can somebody understand a business at the transaction level, which is what is required to make a decent decision, I guess? Even then, you might fail. Okay, even if you did everything for, let's say, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, even then you are going to run into the real challenges. It's far trickier with cloud because you have far more constraints, and even if you miss one thing, you're done. That's how bad it is. So how can somebody, even if you are going to go for a day, you require a lot more depth, a lot more time to spend with business to make an informed decision. And again, I mean, there is a conflict in the business model. Okay, what Gartner and the other analyst firms, what they are trying to sell is a very repeatable IP. Consulting is a very different business model. It's a very different industry in general. Right, so there is a little bit of overlap, but I don't think every firm can do everything. So, I mean, was an argument, I think we were talking on LinkedIn as well, that, hey, my consulting peers are doing research as well. Great idea. But hey, you're probably going to have a little bit of conflict of interest there, when you are publishing research. So what's your take? I mean, I know that there's going to be overlap, but everybody sort of needs to stay in their lane, I guess.
I think it really depends on the needs of the buyer. I think the supply side of the market, I think we care about conflicts of interest much more than buyers do. I think obviously there are regulatory limits on, like you mentioned, I used to work at Deloitte, right? There are regulatory limits on what we can do if we're auditing a company to work with the rest of that company. But in reality, there's incredible synergy between working on both sides of a business. Absolutely, huge synergies. How deep does that expertise need to be for the client to gain value from it? I think you'd be surprised to see what smart questioning and some general knowledge can do, because very often procurement processes become extremely disrupted since the pandemic. So there used to be a lot more, conversation at the water cooler. There used to be a lot more commonly held organizational common sense. Buyers used to be able to pick up on concerns and doubts. There are always devil's advocates around. You just need to go to the canteen and sit down for dinner, and you're going to find other views. Tech buying has changed a lot in the last 5 years. Buying centers are bigger and faster than they used to be, and that makes them messier, right? If you think of momentum being like mass multiplied by speed, right? There's a lot more momentum, and so it's much harder to direct. And that means that going in the wrong direction earlier on can produce, huge consequences later on. Anybody who's looked after software quality understands, fixing something sooner, it costs 1% of fixing it later on. So actually, you're right that you hire an analyst for a day. What is that? That's $10,000, $15,000, but potentially that can have huge consequences.
Yeah.
Especially because we're in this very paradoxical situation right now.
Yeah.
Where buyers are under a lot of pressure to produce not only technology selections but business cases.
Yeah.
And business cases that point for the whole direction for the organization's technology investments. So they have to simultaneously say, in the short term, we're going to have very fast ROI.
Yeah.
And this is how we can mitigate the risk of project launches being delayed or not being successful. But then at the same time, this small investment we're making now is building a bridge to the whole cloud transformation, the whole digital transformation that we want to do in the future. And in reality, if you're trying to do this thing and that thing, you can't optimize two things at the same time. Yeah, you've got a trade-off between these two variables, or you've got to lie. There's this Italian proverb: anybody who has two masters has to lie to both of them.
Yep.
And what analysts can do is help cohere these buying communities that often have to move more quickly with much greater risk in an environment that is itself much riskier, where the cost of capital is still higher than it has been for many organizations in the past. So all of this means buyers are under a lot of pressure and they need more of this analyst support. Honestly, even if the quality of the analyst isn't necessarily rising.
Yeah, great points. So let's go over some more comments here. So, we don't have the name of the user. Thank you so much for joining. If you can enable, I think there's a setting on LinkedIn that you might be able to enable for us to be able to see your name. We would love to see your name. Okay. So we have Arun, and he's saying market product catalogs based on customer level. So maybe provide some insight into this as well. I don't know how many end customers really understand there is a little pricing structure, based on how research firms work, and maybe take that perspective and provide insight into what they should know, I guess, when they are buying these subscriptions, what level of subscription are they going to need, how the pricing is structured, across different research organizations. And I don't know how much intel you are going to have in different organizations. So maybe touch on that a little bit.
Sure. I mean, actually, this question makes me think of it both ways. I mean, analysts themselves are kind of defining markets. And if you think of the way that something like Gartner Peer Insights will define a market, and then you see inside a market segment the vendors that are active, analyst firms do a lot to kind of counter information asymmetry in markets by defining the boundaries of markets and defining what's inside them. And paradoxically, there's an awful lot of information asymmetry when it comes to selecting analyst firms.
Yeah.
One of the things, so for the last 23 years, I've been running an annual study called the Analyst Value Study.
Yeah.
And what this does is it asks people who use analyst firms about the value that they get from analyst firms. And hopefully, unsurprisingly, people are pretty happy with their purchases. Obviously, you would be, otherwise you would stop buying from whoever it is that you were buying from. And firms like Gartner, Forrester, IDC, Omdia, these are, I guess, the big four analyst firms. They're delivering like solid value to their clients, but it can be quite hard from the outside to understand exactly what you are getting when you're buying from them. And a little bit like the way that if you see a car advertised, in the picture it's going to be the top of the line version with all of the trimmings, not the basic ones where you have to pay extra for tires. That very often when analyst firms are promoting themselves, they will tell you everything, and then when you're a client, there might be some limitations. And I must say, just to get something off my chest as a Gartner user, it's one of the frustrations, even if you are a customer of one of these analyst firms, that you might be. I mentioned earlier on the way that they might divide up their own research into particular areas, and subscribers might be able to access only the researchers in one area.
So
I
are these
believe-
areas topical, or how does that distribution work? I guess maybe.
Yeah, I mean, they might be both topical and they might relate to the nature of the product. So for example, there might be market data,
Yeah.
very extensive market sizing data, which is really only useful for vendors. You might run Ovum, Omdia, where I used to work, tracks some contracts, and you can see, across hundreds of millions, maybe billions now of deals, who is holding them, what is the contract, what is the life of them, when does it come up for renewal? Again, that's only useful for a small number of people. So you would want to sell that at a high price to a small number of people rather than including it in your general poll. Forrester is another good example because it produces role-based research. So there's research for analyst relations people, there's research for securities professionals, and so on. And again, they might want to sell that particular silo of research. And what that allows them to do is to make sure that you've got a more coherent user value, and they're making sure that when they're covering a topic, that they are making money on it. But it can produce the frustrating situation I've had, where most of the research that company I'm subscribing to on a topic is not available to me. And that can produce some tensions, and obviously nobody's going to tell you that before you buy.
Of course.
It can be a bit of a surprise though when you get that.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's how sales works, I guess. Sometimes it could be very challenging. So I don't know if you're going to have any more intel on this particular question, if buyers need to know anything else. I know, I mean, the security, the permissions, obviously always going to be a challenge, I guess, any SaaS software, any sort of subscription software. But any other intel that you might be able to remember that you might want to share?
I think a really important thing if you want to buy from analyst firms is to remember that you're really in a buyer's market now. And it's never been a better time to ask for free trials. I think analyst firms are extremely generous. Most analyst firms are extremely generous with free trials. Gartner will offer you proof of concept engagements where you can get face-to-face with an analyst and talk through a business problem that matters to you. So as far as you can do, try before you buy, and don't become too dependent on any one analyst firm. So with Gartner, for example, if you're a client at a particular product, you will normally have a kind of built-in price rise for every year that you've owned that product. So if you bought it last year and I'm buying it this year, you're paying more for it this year because you also bought it last year. You see what I mean? So it's a peculiar kind of inflation. So being able to catch up and step out of your relationship with an analyst firm and then come back into it, that can be super helpful in terms of price performance. Obviously, the analysts won't like it because they love to make money, but it can help you to get more value for money.
Yeah, that's a great intel, I guess, people can use. So thank you so much for sharing that. We have some more detailed comments here. So everyone is saying that I agree with you because analysis are more about market product, but sometimes they missed to analyze and user impact analysis for their product. And I guess these two are two different things in my mind. Always the market sizing is sort of the R&D planning, the product management sort of play. The end user impact analysis is slightly different. I mean, even if I compare from my traditional world, I guess, when you look at, we talk to these people who are doing the product design product, they don't necessarily understand what happens in the implementation space. The challenges are very different.
That's
the
true.
Implementation, it's a very different skill set.
And to be honest, it's not only the vendors who have, so it's not only the analysts who have this problem, it can be the vendors who have this problem as well. The vendors might meet the buyers, but the buyers actually might not, even the buyers might not meet the users. So that is true. I think a couple of things have started to turn that around. One is there's a much greater emphasis on ROI studies now. So most famously, Forrester with its total economic impact studies, Nucleus Research with its return on investment studies, which they even made into a book, which is a great guide, I think, to understanding how you can make more money. And then, of course, the rise of user reviews. The point about these reviews is that they show how the same technology can give very different outcomes to different people.
Yeah.
Of course, the same way that if I give you ingredients and me
Yeah.
ingredients
Yeah.
and the same recipe, we're probably going to cook different meals slightly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But no one is really better placed than analysts to be a substitute for that end user experience. To know what an analyst knows, you would have to speak to dozens and dozens and dozens of end users. And if you speak to a lot of end users, then actually most of their experiences are very similar to each other. You've got to speak to a very large number of people to find out anything interesting, to find out where the pain points are, where the outliers are. Now, for an analyst, when an analyst gets a call from a user, it's almost certainly because something has gone wrong. Right? So analysts are exposed to the most extreme scenarios, to the most important use cases, to where the products are really tested. And that gives them a lot of value, a lot more insight than most people who've maybe just been hanging out at a user group.
Yeah, no, very interesting. And I find these ROI studies fascinating. Okay. I have never seen a single ROI study that is going to have maybe less than 300%. Everything is like 200%, 300%, 400%, some huge figures, which is just mind blowing. Okay. Now, if you look at our space, if you talk to buyers, what they feel in their heart. Okay. Buyers, they quote, and again, this is coming directly from the buyers. Okay. They quote that the 75% failure rate that existed 20 years back is very similar even today.
Yeah. And I think the painful paradox is that both of those things can be true at the same time. Yeah.
How is that? Maybe resolve that. So now I definitely need to know a little bit more there. How is that possible?
Well, imagine if I'm taking you to a casino.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you that you're going to have a great time.
Okay.
And you're going to make a lot of money.
Yeah, and that's a sales pitch, I guess.
Yeah, and between you and me, like what is likely is that you'll have an okay time, and you'll probably and on average you'll leave with more or less as much money as you went into, or slightly less.
Yeah.
So there's a difference between the expectations and the reality.
Yeah.
So I think most IT solutions don't meet expectations because those expectations they are either made too high, or more importantly, they're not made specifically. They're not made clearly enough. You invest in a CRM system, you think that you will have all of the benefits of the CRM system.
Yeah.
You install the CRM system, you understand 3% of it, and you get 3% of the value that you could do. But that doesn't mean that it's not much more efficient than what you had before. Yeah. Now, if it was the case that that 3/4 of IT systems were not generating a positive return on investment, and nobody would be buying new technology. Actually, new technology does pay out. It just doesn't meet these very high expectations that people need. And in a way, that comes back to this idea of hype. Gartner has done a huge service to the tech market in the way that it's popularized the hype cycle.
Yeah.
And what the hype cycle shows is that you actually do need to create inflated expectations for most organizations to be brave enough to invest. And that's just a paradox, that you've got to, you want to tempt your big sister to come out and see a movie with you. Well, maybe you have to hype it up a little bit to your big sister as well, because she'd rather be at home. That's just the reality of humanity.
So that's a very interesting example, and I'm going to share a personal story here. Okay.
Yeah.
So personal story, and this is coming from, I'm a practitioner myself. IT leadership executive. Let's say if I get a job, probably it's going to take at least a year and a half just to get a job. As the IT executive, CFO, it's very hard. It's not easy. You get a job, okay? Now, your job is going to be really hard because they are trying to figure out, how to make money out of you. That's why they have hired you. So now, in my case, let's say if they hire me. Now, I am looking at these reports, 300%, 400% ROI. Great idea. I sell to my executives a dream, a real dream, that you have no idea what you're missing here.
Yeah, that's
It's probably going to be 300, 400%, okay?
Yeah.
They commit for it, believing that I have hired a rock star here who's going to do wonders in this company. And then once they commit to it, the project fails for whatever reason. I don't know, because 75% failure rate is real. It's not a joke.
But again,
it's not a joke. Hold on. So
no, it's not a
now
joke.
I lose my job as the executive.
But if you're an executive who, I mean, so there's something that's just a little footnote that we have to say about these ROI studies, which is there's a big difference between ROI studies which are effectively based on 2 or 3 examples, and ROI studies that are based on extensive samples. So if you look at Forrester, for example, Forrester will use relatively fewer examples.
Yeah,
it's reasonable to think that they may be cherry picked. They are effectively extreme examples of the best outcomes that are achieved. So if you're an IT manager and you take a Forrester TEI and you say we will probably get similar outcomes to the best people who've ever done this, then this is like saying that you're going to buy a car because you can drive as fast as the fastest person who's ever driven your car. That's not realistic. But on the other hand, it does show you what these case studies can do is show you the general direction.
Yeah.
But when you're building ROI, if you are building your ROI estimation not from a concrete analysis of your own business, but by using an off-the-shelf, somebody else experienced this, honestly, you kind of deserve to lose your job if you're doing that, right? What is your business going to save?
Yeah.
You should know what your business is spending. You should be able to identify where the costs are. You should be able to identify where the savings are. And it still can be the case that you cannot meet all of the expectations.
Yeah.
And it can still be a good choice. And that is why the major job of managers is managing upwards, is to manage expectations. So if you're an IT manager, you might think you can get a 300% ROI.
Yeah.
But if you're smart, you are not going to promise that at all, are you? If you're going to say, well, look, what is in my organization?
Yeah.
What are the rules for project financing? How much ROI do I need? What is the lowest ROI?
Yeah.
In the longest possible period of time
that
I can propose and still make money. And that is where you need to anchor your expectations. And honestly, if you work with an industry analyst, that is the kind of thing that they will help you.
Yeah, so very interesting. So basically, in my case, let's say, and I don't know if I knew what I wanted to do, I guess, then I probably don't need the industry research. I'm asking for industry research because I don't know enough and I need to make this decision. I need to convince my peers, I need to convince my executives that doing this is going to bring some value. I'm trusting on this research, I'm trusting on this insight, and based on that, I'm making this decision. But the responsibility falls on my head that I'm supposed to have the judgment what is going to get me 300%, 50%, whatever. Then I guess, I don't know. I mean, see, if the research is still going to be meaningful or so reconcile that difference, I guess, maybe a little bit.
I mean, imagine if so somebody else's experience with a piece of technology is not going to be your experience, right?
Yeah.
Imagine if I'm running a sales organization and it's very bad.
Yeah.
And I'm not using my CRM very well, and I'm losing a lot of leads.
Yeah.
And then if I just start to do 2 or 3 things systematically well, I'm going to have a massive outcome in that. I mean, I'm thinking of there's some colleagues of mine. I used to work for a company called Kia Company, which for some time provided services to analyst firms.
Yeah.
And very often they would go in and they would work with analyst firms' sales teams.
Yeah.
And almost always they would double the pipeline value of these analyst firms within a few weeks, just by stopping the analysts from interrupting the salespeople.
Yeah.
So, and they would not have been able to do that if they were not focusing these analysts to use their technology more effectively and to be distracted less by the analysts.
Yeah.
So I imagine that they will have had an immense return on investment in their CRM because they were starting to use it effectively. But maybe other organizations won't get the same outcome from that CRM, not because the CRM isn't good, but because they just were not very inefficient before.
Yeah.
So to estimate your ROI, you have to start from a material, personal, specific example of what is happening in your business, especially because we're in an environment where the availability of capital is changing a lot. Generally, it's becoming a little bit easier now, and where the price of technology is generally falling in real cash terms.
Yeah.
And that means that there are all sorts of investments that your business should make.
Yeah.
But the art of technology leadership is knowing when you should make those investments, in what order, in order to maximize your cash flows.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, that has to start from a material understanding. When is this problem? What is the cash value of this problem?
Yeah.
And when will the cash value of this problem be more than the cash price of solving the problem? And then when you're there, that's when you should make the investment. And whether it's a great investment for somebody else or not, honestly, it could be a terrible investment for somebody else, but a good investment for you because of materially where you are.
Yeah, very interesting. So let's touch on some more questions, I guess. So here, Arun is saying consultant is a fuel for research in terms of market information. In same way, research helps, I guess, to improve the product level, which help to provide more service in consultant part. So let me try to,
I get this.
Okay, so maybe provide your narration in terms of what's your understanding, because I don't know if I understand the question completely, I guess.
I mean, it's true. I mean, I think what Aaron is saying is that there's a kind of virtual cycle that the more consulting you do, the better the research will be. And then if you have research, then that improves the way that tech providers are developing their solutions. And then that means the market grows, so then there's more opportunity for consultants. So that is absolutely true, and it's one reason, firstly, why analyst firms work very closely with consulting firms. And it's also why analyst firms themselves are developing, maybe we wouldn't call them consultancy services, but advisory services. What I would say, though, is that very often humans fill the gap around technologies. They do the things that the technologies can't do. So as an industry analyst, if I did a consulting project, it was normally because we didn't conduct research on that topic. And so if you're doing consulting on a topic that you don't research, then it's not going to improve your research because you're not researching that topic. It's too specialized or too early stage, or just not a good fit. And that's kind of true with consultancy firms, except that consultancy firms now are so good at developing products themselves. If you're ever in the situation where a consulting firm is doing a lot of work in an area, they are very quickly now going to develop tools, templates, products, anything that they can do to improve the efficiency of the consulting time that the client is buying.
Yeah, so very interesting, and I think I agree with the comment. Thank you so much, Arun, for sharing that. So he has one more comment, and I guess we are coming close to our time now, so we'll probably discuss this and then do the closing advice after this. So he's saying,
this is the same comment.
I guess. Same comment, I guess,
the same comment, just written more nicely.
Yeah, more nicely. Okay, how to manage this based on product service? I guess there are no additional details on the question at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the question that matters, isn't it? How to how can consultancy firms manage this? And I mean, I don't know. This seems like the kind of question that you'll be able to answer, Sam. But I do think it's key to understand that the more you can productize your consultancy, then the more effective you're going to be, both with the product and with your other consultancy.
Yeah, so I guess there are both perspectives, right? And I mean, that's going to be one more thing that I want to discuss. That is going to be around this, question itself, and that is that if you go to any executives, if you ask them, what has been their experience working with any of the consulting companies, they'll always say that they have had far more success, and sometimes we find that mind blowing as well. Working with boutique firms, and then we are asking, why the hell is that? You have consulting firms such as Deloitte, McKinsey. They have been there for a long time. They have logos, they have expertise. Why do you feel that you are getting more success with boutique firms? And their comment generally is that the larger firms have become more of the staffing firms. You just don't have the same passion that the boutique firms are going to have. Generally, with the boutique firms, you have founders involved. They are just more passionate, I guess. They go out of their way to help. So generally, that is their take. I don't know whether people are going to take that or not, but that is not the same thing that we hear in the research industry. So in the research industry, when any of the vendors, okay,
Yeah.
which vendors do you want to target? Gartner, Forrester, those are like top ones. So do you think that this analogy that I just mentioned related to consulting, this might be applicable in the research industry as well, or is it different?
It's absolutely applicable. And then this problem that the reality is that there are 1,000 analyst firms, and if you look at value for money, you would imagine that it would be the biggest analyst firms that would be charging the most, and that they would be delivering the worst value for money.
Yeah.
But actually, that is not the case at all. Yeah. These big analyst firms, they are really in the middle of the market.
Yeah.
When it comes to price performance, and clients are getting the very best value from smaller firms, partly because smaller firms are maybe not quite so good at estimating their costs as larger firms. So, of course, the market leaders are always the most. In any setting, the market leaders, by definition, are going to be, typically the ones who are most famous. If you look at, I can think of my own experience at Deloitte. The big four firms, they often have a lot of kind of boutique niche expertise inside those organizations, but they can be hard to find.
Yeah.
They can be hard to navigate. If you speak to an account manager, so a great example of this, in the human capital space, Deloitte bought a consultancy led by a guy called Josh Burstyn, who was famous in the human capital space.
Yeah.
Deloitte had, probably still does have, like really world-class expertise on that topic.
Yeah.
But your average Deloitte customer speaking to your average Deloitte account manager, this account manager may not be aware of that space.
Yeah.
Of that niche team, and so you're going to find your way towards a niche expert. And of course, you're probably going to get better price performance. You could buy your consultancy from one of the biggest organizations in the world. You could buy it from a small niche provider. Maybe you might get better service from the niche provider. Maybe it might be closer to you. There might be advantages to it. So, broadly speaking, people are buying from the kinds of providers that they want to work with. There's also that thing of cultural fit. Some organizations would love to work with Deloitte because it reflects their aspirations. Other people would rather work with a group of 20 people who are in an office 5 miles away from where they are.
Yeah.
So there's every niche is viable. And the fact that Gartner is super famous, or the big four are super famous, doesn't mean these organizations can't be affected by economic downturns. I think it was PwC or KPMG who laid off 123 partners here in the UK this week, right? Really harsh, even for these big leaders.
Yeah.
And actually, it might be the mid-sized firms that have got enough scale to be trusted and enough appetite to succeed when the big organizations are still, trapped into many legacy client relationships that they can't get out of.
Yeah, no, great. And I think we can spend days, talking to you. You are incredible. You're knowledgeable. There's no question there.
Thank you.
So I don't know if you're going to have any sort of closing advice, maybe short, and then any plug that you might have for the audience.
I think, I mentioned earlier on about the value of shopping around with analyst firms. In the same way that your tech buyer needs to understand the use case, understand the value that they're getting out, rather than having a vague generic idea of what they might get with the technology.
Yeah.
Bring that to your purchasing with analyst firms as well. Yeah. Don't be sold by the fact that they provide general knowledge on everything.
Yeah.
There's a lot of general knowledge available from cheaper or free sources. Specifically identify the particular outcomes and benefits that you want to get. And the more you can build those benefits into your understanding of what your account manager is trying to deliver to you, the more likely you are to get real value for money. I've seen so many organizations that are spending hundreds of thousands or millions with analyst firms, and they can't really put their finger on the benefit. And that makes it very hard to defend and extend the investment that organizations are making in the insight. And that insight is super valuable, but you have to be able to show how it's going to contribute to your bottom line.
Yeah, could not agree more. Great points, and I think people should be paying a lot more attention to these research companies and look at what they have been working on. That could be a tremendous benefit for everybody, for their procurement. On that note, Duncan, thanks so much once again for your time.
Thank you, Sam. And thank you to everybody who submitted questions in the comments as well. This was super useful, and it really lifted up our conversation a lot.
It's always fun. So thank you so much once again for joining, everybody.
Excellent. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.